my name's Fluffy the Destroyer and welcome to my channel. I read the news recently and I've discovered something surprising, I would say. Wow, here's the thing. Xbox executive doesn't think you can tell the difference between 30 and 60 FPS. Yeah. Alright, I personally know the difference between 30 and 60 FPS, but first, let's just make one thing clear here. What is frames per second? Just a small, let's say a small version of what FPS means. It only means it's the thing is it's what your graphic card can unleash, and what it gives you, how many frames a second it can give you. To me that sounds clear. In 1 second you get 60 frames. Like, you think you're playing like a movie, but you're not. It's like still images. 30 a second. It goes really fast. Or 60 a second. That's fast. And your eyes tricks you into believing that it's a movie, but it's not. It's still images. That's what's going on. So the graphic card is just processing those images so fast that you think it's you think it's a movie. So the thing is, why does it look good on console? The problem is, well, not really a big problem. It's because on how the game it works and how it's displayed. The thing is, when you make a game on console, there are some special effects you can use in order to make a console game really good. One of those techniques is motion blur. They use motion blur, like you use an image and then you put another image and you do like a motion blur between them. So you think it's two fixed image, but the reality is when you use those two images together plus the motion blur technique, it looks like it's fluid, but it's not. Sometimes it's really not enough. The implications to is, wow, it's just really heavy. This is the UK marketing boss of Xbox. This is something here. This is not like me. I would expect something like, this is what he had to say. If you put third-party games side by side that are running at slightly different resolutions of frame rate, then unless you're using a screen that's more than 60 inches big, I defy you to really see the difference. I personally struggle to see the difference. That's what I expect. I don't know, like my wife, my mother, or any person who games really like in a casual form. That's what I expect. I would even expect that. I just don't want to insult anyone here, but from console gamers as well, because they're really used to the 30 frames per second thing. I would really expect that from them as well. It's wrong. From this guy. He's the UK marketing boss. This is not like any guy here. We're talking about I would say like a VIP inside Microsoft here. This is the guy who has some implications into, like, he's the marketing boss here. He's telling the world, my games are better than Sony. That's what it means. That's what he means. That's what he wants to tell the world. He has some implications because when he talks to developers and publishers and everyone, like, the performance has to be on the table at some point. He has to give the info as, well, here's the performance on how we can what the game can give. Here's the performance of my machine, the processing power, the graphics power, what you can use as a display, like HDMI display and all that crap. And at one point, I mean, the frames per second has to be on the table, like directly or indirectly. And the thing is, if it's done badly, it can end up really bad. Like, for example, when you port it to a PC, like a racing game, some bad ports have been done in racing games and fighting games, and I would say action first-person shooter games. If it's done badly on the console, chances are whatever you get on the PC will be very, very, very bad. It's just unimaginable. For example, racing games, first-person shooter games, and fighting games, like not everything but those, to me, should be 60 frames per second. It shouldn't be 30 frames. It's just not acceptable anymore. Like, you need that super quick hyper responsiveness from the games. Well, when you're fighting, for example, like in Bayonetta, for example, this one, like Black Ops 2, Dead or Alive 5, and Bayonetta on the Xbox 360, they all run at 30 frames per second, but Bayonetta on the PS3 runs at 30 frames a second. Play both games. Well, I do have a video, so I'm gonna link it in the description. You'll see the difference. It shows. Like when you fight, you need that punch yesterday. And when you fight in a 30 frames per second, chances are you're going to be beaten, or you're going to have less chance to throw a really quick punch. The responsiveness will be less. Same goes for a racing game. When you need to accelerate, to brake, or to get in that corner, like you get into the apex and you need that, I would say, that really quick responsiveness from the engine. And in some games it just doesn't work really well. You don't have the performance that you really need or you really want, unfortunately. And there are some games, like, for example, here's a list of games here that I have, like, searched, because I don't have any console here, but I did some searching, and wow. And I know, like, I know personally that those games runs at 30 frames a second or so. So here's the list. Dead Space, well, all the franchise from all the games from the Dead Space, they're locked at 30. And when it's like when the VSync is enabled. Yeah, so can you imagine that when you're a PC gamer that you got DirectX 10 or 11? It's hell. It shows. It's even if you use motion blur. I know for a fact that if you install Grand Theft Auto 3, there is a option inside the game called motion blur. I turned it off because it was giving me a headache. Unfortunately, in PC games, motion blur doesn't work well in all games, like especially in Grand Theft Auto 3. I know it's an old game, but you should see the difference between motion blur when you enable it and when you deactivate it. It really shows in that game. Saints Row 2. I don't know why, but I know it's an old game again, but that game just doesn't run well, even with today's standards, with today's PC. Sometimes it can't even run at 15 FPS, not 50, but 15 FPS. It's really that bad. It's just not well coded. GTA 4, I even got it here. The games for Windows version. That run, like, I have a GTX 670, a 8-core AMD 8350, 16 gigs of RAM, DDR3, 1600 megahertz. And I can barely get 60 FPS. The game is that coded. It's not coded well. It sucks at that point, at that at that subject. We also have Bully from Rockstar. That game is capped at 30 FPS. Put it on PC and trust me, you'll see the difference. Need for Speed: The Run. It's capped at 30 FPS, and it doesn't even have the anti-alias option. Need for Speed Rivals. Oh man, that game is capped at 30 FPS, and if you dare unlock it to 60 FPS, hacks, command lines, whatever. I didn't look into it because I didn't buy it. I only saw Total Biscuits Let's Not Play video. A really funny one, and he did unlock it to 60. It's not playable. It's like playing a game on fast forward. If you remember the game called, I think it was TIE Fighter, like a really old DOS game, TIE Fighter, you had like a command on your keyboard that you pressed, and you would play the game like 2, 3 times or 4 times faster than it was intended for. I don't know why. And the game would be just unplayable for me. That's how fast it was played. Like, to me, if you look at a racing game in a fighting or first-person shooter game, it should be at 60 FPS, nothing less. I know that in some modes, well, some genre, whatever how you say it, like strategy games or adventure, like point and click, for example, I'm okay for the fact that they run at 30. Even some MMOs out there, because let's face it, MMOs today are just fixed on the cooldown cycle, so it doesn't really make any sense to make it faster. You just click on the button, and then you wait until the cooldown has passed, and you click on the skill again. It's always like that, most of the time. So it really doesn't make any sense to make it at 60. It could be beautiful, and I know that when a developer house or a publisher tells their crew or their team, like, I know that they have like limited resources here. They have to work with what they have. But there's a standard, there's a minimum that every game should have. Like, for example, like I've said before, racing games, they should be 60. No excuse. Not 30, not 40, 60. I know it doesn't run constantly. Like, for example, today, when you play PlanetSide 2, I know that some people have problems playing at 30 frames per second. My system can run it at 50 and sometimes 60. But when there's too much people, when you get into a tower, for example, there's like over 200 people at that same location. Wow. My system takes a hit. It goes down to 40, 35 or 40 or something. Like, you see the tanks shooting at the towers, you see the Liberators shooting down, and it's hell. You see some galaxies here and there. Sometimes they do like a quick run to shoot down with the Bulldogs guns. Think of it as a big shell, like an exploding shell. It's like a high explosive shell. It does splash damage, and it becomes hell in that tower. I know for a fact that that game, even though with my system that can run it at 60 FPS correctly, it really takes a hit. That's what I have to say about this subject, but if you have any comments, put them down below, and if you did like this video, just, again, put a comment. Click on subscribe and rate it. If you don't, again, just put a comment on it in the video down below, and just be constructive, please. See you later.